I'd like to welcome everybody to the first day of this series called We Got This, Conversations to Make Connections. It's a collaboration between the Zada Cooper Symposium Committee and the College of Pharmacy Genesis Board. My name is Barbara Kelly. In case there are people on here, there have been quite a few, a wide reach of people invited and may not know us. I'm the Director of External Relations at the UI College of Pharmacy. This session is being recorded, mainly just for internal reasons, and to get, because there's going to be some great content on here. Today's session is titled Grit and Resilience in the Struggle. Our hosts are going to be Nicole Brogdon, Assistant Professor, UI College of Pharmacy, and Breanne Bakken, Assistant Professor, Medical College of Wisconsin School of Pharmacy. And I'll let them get started. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Barb. We have been very much looking forward to this. So this is something that Nikki and I hope you don't mind, we're going to be somewhat casual during this, and we would encourage all of you to participate and share your questions and engage in conversation as well. This is something that Nikki and I put together. Yes, cheers, of course. This is something we put together for Zada Cooper. And we wanted to revisit that and kind of take a new spin on the same topic in a new time. So we realized, and it was actually kind of laughable, we pulled up our slides from a few years ago, and the content was great and very relevant, but it was almost, we actually got a good giggle because a lot of it just doesn't apply to the current situation. So that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, and then, today's Monday of this week, of course, and so we have something going on almost every day this week to promote some kind of leadership, whether it's working with members of the Zada Cooper Committee or working with some of the Genesis Board members. And, one of the reasons that we wanted to kind of talk about this topic at the beginning is because, in the spirit of Zada as a leader, times are always going to get tough, and they're going to get tough at different times for different reasons. And part of being a real leader is learning to kind of adjust in those times, figure out what works for you, figure out what works for those around you. And usually this symposium has focused a little bit more on what we would call sort of external type of leadership skills. So, how do you lead others, and how do you kind of set this example? And in the current situation, with all of us sort of being distant and sort of isolated in different ways, this really is a time where you have to focus a little more on leading yourself and figuring out what you need to do to kind of get through this time. And of course, some of that will sort of just bleed into the other parts of your life and naturally start to help those around you. But we really wanted to focus on kind of you as the individual and what we can help you with as far as just trying to find your grit and really kind of maintain some resilience as we get through this struggle, because the reality of it is that we are all struggling through this in different ways with different issues. And so we hope that some of these topics can be a little bit more just generally applicable to a lot of you. And what's really kind of fun about this call is that we have a number of people from a variety of different training levels, different places in their career. And so we really do want to promote some open discussion. So as we go through, we have kind of a shell of topics that we but as we sort of get through these topics, please feel free to put something into the chat window and let us know if you have questions or topics that you want to bring up. We do have a couple of places where we are going to pause and just kind of leave some room for open discussion. But feel free at any point in here to put some things in the chat window, and we'll try to get to those as we go. And so I think if Bree, you want to go to the next slide, if we want to talk about some of the general topics that we're going to cover today. So the first thing that we really want to cover, and we will cover this for most of the talk, or most of the session, I guess, is really kind of the process of handling yourself. So you can look at this from a couple of different perspectives, but in the current situation with all of us sort of having to be isolated in different ways at home, isolated in our jobs, isolated just through a number of ways. We really want to talk about how do you survive just by handling yourself, and how do you manage your own mental health, your own physical health, and how do you kind of get through this. And then there is this component as well about kind of handling the world around you. So once you kind of learn how to really handle yourself and manage your own emotions and your own struggles, then we want to kind of talk about how that extends into the world around you and how you can use those skills to sort of manage your reactions to others, and really just your reactions to sort of all of the things that are sort of pouring into us now from the media, from social media, email, et cetera, et cetera. So this is sort of our roadmap for today. And the first thing on the list here that we're going to talk about is this concept of work-life integration.
So this is something that, and it actually works out really well. I think Nikki and I both feel the same way about this title or about this topic. You hear a lot about work-life balance. And I think both her and I would agree that that's really not the best term. And we're very, very strong proponents of thinking more about work-life integration. Because I think the minute you throw balance into it, you're basically saying that you're some way out of balance and that you always feel like two things are competing. And the reality is you only have one life. And you shouldn't view them as things that you have to compete with, your home and your personal life or other things that are going on. But really, how do you meld those together? And again, this is one of those slides where Nikki and I both just kind of giggled. It's like, well, that's full integration right now that we're
there's no other option now.
Right? We're in it. We are in full integration mode. And I know that presents some challenges. And those are some of the things we're going to talk about today too. But I would really encourage everyone to think about how you do integrate that both now. And then what's that going to look like when we go back to our offices? And now we have to kind of pull things back apart and try to make sure that we are keeping some semblance of integration with our personal lives and our work selves and work lives as well.
And one of the things that I think right now, I think I can generally speak for a lot of us on this call, that we tend to be people who like to have a fairly high level of control over the things in our lives and the things that happen to us. And so trying to maintain some kind of like healthy kind of integration between your work life and your home life, I think is something that we all value very highly. And in the current kind of situation that we're in, that control has just been taken away from all of us. So we're all finding ourselves in situations that we didn't choose to be in. And whether or not we like it, the actions of our neighbors, of our colleagues, of all of the people in our community directly affects us in one way or another. And I think that sense of losing control, on top of the fact that now we have no physical separation at all between our work life and our home life, that makes this concept even more important, because now they feel like they're sort of imposing on each other, and we have to figure out a way to separate that. So we can't be physically separated at this point like we normally would be. And so this kind of brings up this concept of compartmentalizing. And we before had talked about this concept in terms of compartmentalizing and sort of finding separation. And we've reframed it a little bit into making separation, because this is one area that it won't look the way that it did before, but you can actively try to make separation. It's a much more active part that we have to take in our own lives in trying to just really get things separated mentally and physically. And so Bree and I are going to talk a little bit here about just some kind of methods for mentally and physically compartmentalizing and just kind of separating out the various parts of our lives with the intent to try to maintain just some overall sort of sanity and organization to our lives, both mentally and physically.
You know, I think both the last slide and this one for me really rings true that, I think finding that work-life integration and being able to make separation, those aren't things that you just stumble upon. They don't just happen magically. You really have to make a conscious effort to think about how you are integrating your personal life and your work life. And then also, how do you find ways to separate them when you need to be focused on one or the other? So one of the stories I like to share, and the one I shared back when we had this at Zada, when we were live, a ritual that I kind of created for myself when we were working in person in the office. I always wore a badge. So I always have my pharmacist badge. For me, I kind of made that a part of my work identity. And it also helped me separate. So when I was in the office, the first thing I did is I put my badge on. And for me, that kind of signaled I'm at work now. I have to be my professional self. I have to focus on the tasks at hand and do the things that need to get done. And likewise, there are things that happen for, a number of you, and for myself as a pharmacist. I can think of days when I was a resident or when I'm working at the hospital, and sometimes you see traumatic things, or you see things that kind of weigh on you, and you have to find a way to leave that there. And so at that point in time, when we were working, I really needed to make that separation. So one of my rituals was always taking my badge, and I had this pocket that I put it in my purse and zipped it closed. And so for me, that was the day is over, it's away, and now I'm going to think about my personal life and my home, and kind of let some of those things go. And, this is one of those things that now I've kind of thrown that out the window, right? I don't put my badge on in the morning. Maybe that would help. Maybe that would help me get in the zone. I might have to try that. So now I've got to find a new approach. And again, you have to do it intentionally, and you have to think it through what's going to work. So at my house, we only have one office, and my boyfriend staked claim on the office pretty quickly. So I had to kind of find what's going to be my space. And so for me, I took over a kind of a spot in our dining room where we don't actually use it that often. And so for me, that became my workspace. And I made a very conscious effort to not work in my kind of fun spaces, right? So I don't work from the couch where I usually want to veg out and watch TV, or I don't work in my space where I like to work out. And so that makes this spot on the kitchen table or my dining room table is work. And when I'm done, I close my computer and I go to kind of the fun space, or it's, a physical location that is different. And that's kind of how I've chosen to make space in my home to make it feel different.
And, my situation's a little bit different from Bree's, because I actually I live in a fairly large house, and I'm pretty lucky that my husband and I actually have very separate office spaces, as in we are 2 floors apart from each other. His office is in the basement, and I'm up on the 2nd floor. So we have a lot of physical separation, but what I started noticing after the first probably week or two of being in this constantly working from home situation was it was really bizarre, but I was starting to sort of resent my home office. And I'm in my home office now. It's an area that I love. It's only my space. This is all my things. A lot of these things are very important to me. And what I had found was when I was sort of leaving work at the end of the day, if you will, I would just leave my office door open. And it almost was just this constant, beckoning to me of, this is your office and there's your computer and you can see it, and there's always work to be done. There's always something else that could use your attention right now. And I really started to just resent my office because it became a place that I just didn't like anymore. And so what I have found that I need to do is I actually, when I'm done with work at the end of the day, 5:30ish, I have to make a conscious effort to shut my laptop. I have to leave my office. I turn off the lights. I shut the door, and I very rarely come back in here until the next morning. And so this has just become only my office space. So I don't do really any crafts in here. I don't do anything fun. This has just become that space. And on that same token, I've done a very similar approach to what Bree does, is that I no longer work on the couch. I don't work on my porch very often. I've tried that for a couple of meetings, and it just kind of mentally got confusing for me, because now my whole office started to feel, or excuse me, it's even a word slip. My whole home started to feel like an office. It didn't matter where I was, the computer could go with me. And that's just not a healthy mindset. And, we have colleagues, the students on the call, you have probably experienced this as well. Some of you have children at home, and some of your classmates have children at home. I have colleagues that have children at home, and I realize that presents a very different type of situation for trying to make some, just making separation. And a couple of tips and tricks that I've heard from colleagues. One colleague told me that she actually has just kind of a tall box, and she cut it off, so she just has 2 sides of the box. It's a fairly tall box that she saved from an Amazon order. And her sort of home office, if you will, is in the middle of their living room, and she's got children at home. They're old enough to be on their own, but they're still kids running around and want your attention all of the time. So she's just worked out kind of a situation with her kids that she puts up this box. They can still see her entire upper body. She's sitting above the box, of course. But when that box is up, she's in her office, and they know, generally speaking, that if mom is in that box right now, we need to be a little bit more mindful. Like, we can't just interrupt. We can't just barge in on her, or if she's on a phone call, we can't just interrupt. And so I think that even if you are in kind of a small apartment and you don't have a lot of physical separation that's available to you, I still think you can get sort of creative with how you approach some of that. And this is going to require full active engagement of some of your family members as well. If you're not living by yourself, which most of us are not, you really need to cooperate with those in your household and figure out what works for all of you. And another thing that could work as well, if you don't have physical separation, I have a graduate student who I was talking with last week, and he was really struggling with working at home. He lives in a studio apartment with his boyfriend. They have like a kitchen table that is the dining room table, that is the everything table for the house, you know, and like if he's at work, you know, his boyfriend is like on the couch 10 feet away. And he was really struggling with that. And so we kind of worked through a couple of different options. And one thing that really worked for him was that he came up with a system that when he went to study or to work on his research projects, he just puts in headphones and he puts on like a white noise app. So for him, it's like constant feed of something that's not distracting, but he's not hearing what's happening in his apartment. And then his boyfriend knew, you know, if you've got your headphones on, you're kind of in a zone, you're focused, and I don't want to bother you. And even something small like that, to make just a conscious effort, can really make a difference to make some of that separation. So, you know, I would encourage you to kind of think about what some of those things might be, like in your own home or just in your own situation that you can make work for you. You know, the second component of this is the mental separation. And that can be quite a bit more tricky because everyone's going to have a different approach to this. But this is something that's really important because you have to sort of think about this of, you know, even in your mind, you've got sort of your work mind and you've got your emotions that come along with your home life. And, you know, there's no black or white. There's a big gray area in between where a lot of these things bleed together. And it makes it even more difficult when you can't leave it, so to speak, at work and come home. And so, you know, Bree has some really good tips for kind of working through that mental separation, for how you can kind of create this mental image for yourself that can actually help create that separation.
And I should throw out a little bit of a disclaimer at the beginning. So I practice yoga, and that's something that has always helped me with my mindfulness and kind of staying very present. And I think that's kind of what allows me to think about things in this way. So you'll just have to bear with me. I think yoga is a lot about visualizing things. And so for me, and I've used this method with students as well in the past, where students have come in and said, you know, I'm struggling with this thing, like this thing at home or a family member. And I struggle when I come in for an exam to focus and kind of let that stuff go. And I think we all can think of examples like that in our lives. And so that's kind of where this picture of the box comes in. So if you think about, you know, you come into the office and you feel like you're carrying that thing from home, I encourage people to think about and even close your mind and envision a box in your lap or in your hands, and actually imagine the things that are weighing on your mind. Imagine them as if they're floating into this box, like you're filling the box with the things that you don't need right now. And you're putting that box on a shelf. You're not burying it forever. You're not saying I'm never going to address these things, because that's not helpful. But you're saying right now I have this thing I need to do, whether that's taking an exam or focusing on the NAPLEX or whatever that thing is. And knowing that you can return to that and open that box and address it when you have the time and when it's the right time. And I think that's something that's worked for me in trying to kind of compartmentalize or put things away and pull them back at different times. And I know that right now that this is kind of a different scenario. And I think we've kind of got two box analogies here, where one, you're kind of packing it and setting it to the side and maybe using it as a perimeter. But I think all of these kind of mental and visual cues that you can make both for yourself and for the other people that you're interacting with is really helpful. Nikki, I really like the one about the headphones. That was actually a method that I used as a resident. So in my residency, we had 30-ish residents in one office. So a lot of people vying for your time, hard to focus. And that was an indicator that kind of my part of the office, we agreed that if the headphones are in, I'm working. Like, I need to focus, kind of let me be. If I have them off, you know, you feel free to talk. I'm free, if you will. So set up those things and those cues. and also do your best to verbalize those things as well. And I think that'll lead in well to our next topic, which is thinking about expectations. And when I think about expectations, I think that those need to be very clear. And so verbalizing what those expectations are can be helpful. Like the example, I recognize that a lot of my colleagues have young children at home that might pop in and make a cameo appearance. And I think that our times are changing. We've become so much more accepting of that, which I think is great. But also, if you are in that boat, just tell your colleagues, like, by the way, I'm home with kids. They might make a cameo, don't worry. And I think most people are going to be really receptive to that and be like, oh yeah, that's great. I'd love to see your kids. And the reality is, I think now with this whole situation, speaking from my own experience, being, just my boyfriend and I trapped in our house together, I actually enjoy seeing other people's family. It's more humans that I haven't seen in a long time. So I think take that with, a grain of salt, and just recognize that people are much more accepting, and kind of make those new expectations verbally to your colleagues, to your peers. And I think the second part of that is we also need to change our expectations of ourselves. I think I've read some really great articles recently talking about how productivity has changed. And I think one of my favorites was, you're not as productive as you used to be, and that's okay. And I think that really is okay. We need to be a little bit softer with ourselves. We're working in different environments with different people, with different technology, and we might not be as productive as we used to be. And maybe that's okay. I shared an example with Nikki earlier today that I have this series of reports. I run some data and put together a dashboard on a every other month or so basis. So I've gotten pretty good at them. I feel like I'm pretty proficient. Usually I block off a couple hours to do all these reports. And today it took me significantly longer in my mind than it should have, right? I've done these 100 times. Why did this take so long? I don't know whether it's I'm in a new environment, I've got distractions. I also only have one screen when usually I have two. All of those things add up. And I think you have an option, right? I could have done that and have been, agonizing and kind of beating myself up over it. But instead it's like, you know what? That took me longer, but it's done. And that's okay. And we're going to find time for those other things tomorrow.
Yeah. And I think that the other kind of half of this coin is that I think we all will, just be a little bit happier with our situations if we just step back and acknowledge that this is messy. So this is messy physically because our lives are just like feeling like they're all over the place. Your work life is your home life is in your office. That it's really messy, but it's really messy emotionally and mentally. I mean, there's just a lot of emotions going on. And, I've experienced this myself where one day I'm like, I kind of like working at home. I see my dogs. I happen to like my husband and I see him a lot. So that works out pretty well. It seems okay. And then like 30 minutes later, my husband comes upstairs and I'm just like a lunatic. And I'm like, what are you doing in my space? Don't bother me. I can't talk to you. And I can't really explain it. It's like these weird, like mood swings almost. And I'm not typically a really moody person. But the mental component of this is just really hard. There's a lot of just like underlying anxiety going on. And if you don't have the luxury of true physical separation of like, I can close the door on an office and walk away, man, this is really hard. And I think that that's something that we kind of need to acknowledge and be gentle with ourselves and be gentle with others. And, one thing that I struggle with, this is kind of compartmentalization, and it's kind of like this, it's like a perfect like depiction of what everyone sort of feels like right now. Like everyone seems frazzled, everyone seems sort of short fused. And everyone's dealing with different things that you just can't see. And that is the case on a normal basis, but it's just heightened so much more right now. And I think that we just need to kind of take a step back and give ourselves a little bit of grace, give ourselves a little bit of room to breathe. And one thing that I do this fairly frequently, even in normal times, but I've done it a lot more now. I'm sort of someone who likes to write things down. And part of it is because I like to get it out of my head. And part of it is that I like the visual of seeing it because it helps me see if I'm like very disproportionately like focus on one thing versus another. It kind of helps me see where I need to work on as far as like changing my mental, just sort of shifting my mental energy as much as I can. And I think that finding whatever those things are for you is really important. And sometimes, especially for sort of the younger people on the call who are more in the student phase, early learner, early career kind of phase, this is a phase where you really just kind of have to take some time and experiment with what works for you. So like Bree talked about how she's very good at compartmentalization because of her yoga training and some of that background. And I compartmentalize in a very different way when it comes to exercise. So I actually do like much more, I would say, high intensity type of exercise. And I do more like weightlifting exercise. That's a totally different form of sort of like in the moment, because if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, you're going to drop your weights and somebody's going to get hurt. It's a totally different way of being in the moment that allows me to like just not think about whatever else it is that I'm doing. And so, you know, there's like this really fluid kind of approach between loosening up some of your expectations and figuring out what you need for yourself in order to sort of get yourself on a road to recovery. And with this road to recovery, it kind of sounds like you're coming out of this like long-standing thing that's going to take months and months to recover from, and that's not true. So there's sometimes what we would call like micro recoveries, where sometimes during the day you just need to like walk away, get away from your desk, go for a walk, just do something that lets your mind like reset a little bit. And then there's sort of the more what I would call like kind of intermediate type of recoveries for a mental perspective. So for me, it was really, really, really hard for me when the gym closed because I don't have a lot of that equipment at home. And so last week, I guess I'm sort of a weirdo in this, but I splurged and I bought myself a set of the battle ropes, which are those like gigantic ropes that you see people working out with, like you throw them around. And so I got cleared out my garage, so my neighbors are going to think I'm a lunatic. But I'm going to be doing like exercises with these ropes in my garage and in my driveway, because that is something that I really miss and I really need it. Of course, I can't do that every 30 minutes. So that's more of like a focused time at the end of my day. But these are kind of some of the mental, like they're physical, but they're mental things as well that can kind of like continually help you like recover and pick up these little pieces that, you know, throughout the day, it just feels like they're breaking all around you. And, you know, we do have the power to pick them up and put them back together for ourselves, but you have to do it constantly and consistently before it becomes sort of catastrophic. And like you have to repave the entire road. And that's what we really want to try to avoid, because resiliency is much harder if you just try to like pick up these gigantic pieces and then they all break again and you kind of go through that vicious cycle. That's not really a healthy way to kind of like continually recover. So that's kind of one way to think about how you recover. Is it like a micro recovery? Is it like a macro recovery? Is it like an overhaul? So there's all of these different levels that you can think about for trying to like help yourself mentally and physically kind of overcome some of these stresses that we're all encountering just every day.
One of the other things that Nikki and I talked about is this idea of self-care. And I think oftentimes self-care, to me, it feels like people treat it like it's very delicate. And it's, you know, it's going to get a manicure and it's like being like over exorbitant and focused on yourself or lavish. And I think we need to change that. Self-care is something that you need. And that might be wildly different for different people. So for some people, it might be getting a manicure or pedicure, and that's fantastic. And for other people, I think, you know, Nikki and I are probably on the other end of the spectrum. Like, I need a really great workout, whether that's yoga or lifting weights or something kind of strenuous. But it's going to be different for everybody. So find out what that self-care is for you. It might be reading, it might be cooking dinner. What is that thing that helps you recharge and feel ready to go again? And I think to Nikki's point, that really is what resilience is about. It's not always just grinding it out or feeling like militaristic and like I'm just going to drag myself down and get through it. It's really about building good habits that allow you to bounce back and still work at a high level, even when the times are tough. And that definitely takes a lot of self-care and focus and building in that recovery so that you can keep going.
And one thing you also may find is the types of recoveries that you need now might be different from what you have needed in the past. They might be completely different from what you think you need. And I can use myself as an example of this. So I'm not typically somebody who really loves to just sit down and watch a movie on a weekend night. It's just not something that I do a lot of. And I don't know why that is. I just don't do it much. But I have found much more in the last few weeks that I have gravitated towards that much more than I ever have in the past. And I've kind of finally associated it with the fact that it is a really good, it's just a mental escape. It's something I don't have to work at. It is sort of just fed to me. I can kind of be passive, watch a good movie, let the story be told to me, and then it gives me just a mental escape for a couple of hours. And you can get the same thing from a really good book, from a podcast. I mean, there's a number of ways that you can achieve that. It could be just going out for a hike. So, I would encourage, everyone on the call here to kind of think about, like, is your typical sort of recovery path that what you do every day, is it still working for you? And if it's not, like, where can you sort of change that, and come up with maybe some more creative ways, work with your family, just take some time to reflect on it and think about, like, okay, maybe there's other ideas here, other ways I can figure this out, and just see if something might work better for you, just kind of at this moment in time, knowing that this is just not a normal situation for any of us at this point.
This is a perfect time. Our next slide is actually, we want to open it up and engage with everyone else. I think there's a lot of power in sharing different ideas, what works, what doesn't work, for all of us. And I also want to pause and take a brief innocent plug. I know Nikki mentioned another great way to escape and recover is to listen to podcasts. And if you haven't listened to Melissa Corrigan's podcast, Melissa RX, please go listen to that. She's got great stuff on there and is constantly interviewing great people. So with that, please use your mic and share what's worked and what hasn't. You can also tell us, like, whether we're full of crap or if you agree with anything we said. That's always appreciated too.
Bree and Nikki, I've been putting together puzzles.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's like puzzles are fun because they, like, require some focus, but not a lot of, like, intellectual focus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like that's a good form of, like, kind of being in the moment without having to work really hard, like, mentally. Yeah, I can see that.
I also take a lot of breaks. So I can come back, regroup, focus.
Yeah. I think a lot of us are kind of in that. I break a lot more now than I usually do, like when I'm at my office.
I also eat a lot more snacks.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I do too.
So Kayla, what's the biggest puzzle you guys have put together?
It was a 1,000-piece puzzle, and it was 15 different types of chickens.
Oh, geez.
Wow.
I didn't know there was 15 types of chicken.
Maybe 12. I don't know, but
that's more than I knew.
Yeah.
What about some of the students on the call? You guys are in a very different, just overall situation than some of the faculty on the call. Are any of you willing to kind of speak up and just give feedback on what has worked for you or what questions you have maybe?
This is Michael Parisi. I'm a P4.
Yeah.
What works for me is I'm from Puerto Rico, so a lot of the things I miss from home, I don't get to do as much here. So I've been taking this time, a lot of free time, to really cook recipes, play board games from Puerto Rico, which has been very nice. I would encourage other people from different backgrounds to pursue that also, if not already.
Yeah, that's a great thought. Looks like Kayla does the same. Oh, Kayla misses the gym. Yeah, I miss the gym a lot too, you guys. Like, I think that, I know this sounds really kind of bizarre, but that might have been the biggest blow for me. Like, was when the gym closed, I was, like, devastated. Because I really like my gym family. I really liked seeing them. I really liked just, getting there and, like, I know this sounds really bizarre, but I sort of liked getting to the gym, seeing the workout for the day and being like, oh man, this is going to be awful. And then, for the next, like, hour and a half, I didn't think about work at all, like, not even a little bit. And I really do sort of miss that. And that is really hard to get at home. Have you guys For any of the students on the call, if you do miss the gym or kind of your normal workouts, have you guys come up with ways to work around that a little bit so that you still get some semblance of the gym?
I feel like I've gotten really creative. Like I've been using like just household things to like lift with, and like I thought I would never be a runner, but I've like gotten into running now because what else am I gonna do? So yeah, I've been trying to make it work.
I've seen a lot of videos of colleagues using like milk jugs or like empty milk jugs with water, like because they can't get at home. So yeah, I love your creativity.
Yeah.
Thanks. I use cans, like a bench to like lift, like all kinds of stuff.
I've been really amazed at how heavy cans can be. I've done a couple of exercises that, they work more like micro muscles. Man, I'm going to start buying smaller cans of soup after this. I can tell you that. Because they get heavy pretty fast.
Yep.
Anyone else have any, questions, or you want to speak up about things that have worked for you or things that haven't worked for you? That's equally as valuable.
Any struggles?
Nikki, and Bree, there's a couple. I was just going to read some comments. They're going by fast. Matt Busolacci says, Busolacci, I'm sorry if I say that wrong. Definitely blocking times throughout the day to fit in interests, golf, fishing, walking around the lake. Example, take 2 or 3 hours to study for boards and then take 30-minute walk with the dog and come back and study. And he agrees with Michael about cooking. Mm-hmm. And then quite a few commented on Beachbody and on demand, and that's been great. Rachel Whitesett talks about, I love the advice about setting boundaries, and those that you live with have struggled when at home. Also been doing Zumba over Zoom. Reed says we use logs we pull out of the woods for walking on a path near our farm. Wow. And Brett Barker, I has some TRX straps for home. TRX straps. And then also spending time with or cooking Lego sets and photography. And Melissa is doing Bar 3 online or Bar 3 Iowa City live stream. So that's just to catch all the chat up.
One that I will throw out if people are looking for free workouts or things that they can engage with, I started doing the Peloton app. So if you're familiar with the Peloton stationary bike, they actually have a separate app where they have yoga and weightlifting and running, indoor and outdoor running and walking classes, and also meditation. And they were doing a free 90-day free trial. So if you've never done it before. So I would definitely encourage you to check that out if you're looking for some other ways to work out and find things to do. So. All right, well, I think we have a few more slides, and then we actually have another slide like this at the end where we'll also open it back up to talk more. So keep thinking about some of your ideas, or if there are things that you want to chat about, get some advice from the wonderful people that are on this call. We would encourage that as well.
Mm-hmm. So the next 2 slides, there we go. So these are focused a little bit more on kind of how we handle our relationships with other people, because it takes a long time to sort of figure out, especially in the current environment that we're in, how to compartmentalize yourself, how to figure out what you need to really recover well and to get through every day, because every day seems like it does come with its own challenges that are very different, and expectations seem to be changing all the time. But there's also this built-in component that we have to interact with the people around us as well. And those interactions have completely changed. So not only do we have a situation where everybody is sort of tense and stressed and on edge for a number of reasons, they may be grieving certain things. There's just a lot that we don't know about what's going on in people's lives. So we have that layer of it that's more intense than normal, but we also have this layer of all of our communication is like it is right now. So, it's not face-to-face, it's all through this weird computer format. And, we've come a long way in terms of what our availability, our options are and availabilities for some of these online formats, but it's not the same. And so one of the things that we kind of wanted to just highlight here is kind of this concept of responding to people, but not always reacting to people. And I think in the current environment that we're in, it is very, very easy to snap at people, either on the phone or in person to your loved ones or just through email. It's very, very easy to get judgy of people and kind of have this like, why can't you just get it together? Like, you told me you were going to have this done and you don't, or, this is really poor quality. There's a number of reasons that we can get sort of snippy with each other. And this is really hard because when you have those initial reactions, it is really hard to walk away from that. And it's really hard to calm that down. But this is really a time that I would encourage everyone to sort of think about, like, how do we actually respond to people and how can we kind of curate some of those responses? So we don't aggravate somebody else and we give them some grace, give them some space. If they are upset about something that we're not aware of, let them kind of work through that. But there is a component of self-care in this too, in that I know myself personally, when I have a really snappy reaction to someone and I send an email that's kind of rude or short, I don't feel good about that later either. And so now I'm in a situation where I feel like I've potentially made this other person's day worse. It didn't solve the problem. And now I feel like crap too. That doesn't help anybody. And so I think this is one of the hardest things to do because we're human and we have reactions. And especially when everything is done kind of under this veil of a computer in front of you, in between you, so you don't have to see somebody in person and sort of deal with that. It's a lot easier to shoot off really snippy messages and be rude with people. So this is one thing I would encourage you to sort of, as much as you can, take a step back and try not to just have that knee-jerk like reaction or judgment of someone, and try to just have a moment to breathe and think about, okay, there's probably a lot going on here. And, even if this person is just sort of a wretched human being, it still doesn't help you to like go after them. You know what I mean? It doesn't help the situation. So try to keep those sort of perspectives in mind as we, start kind of moving forward through this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think empathy is always important, and even more so now with everything that's going on. So the last item that we wanted to talk about, we called this mindful detachment. There's a lot of stuff circling out there, whether it's, choose your social media, whether you're on Facebook or Twitter or all of the above. There's a lot of stuff out there. And the reality is that stuff does influence how we feel and how we think. And it's important to be really thoughtful and knowledgeable about that. For some people, maybe engaging in social media is helpful. And I think for others, too much of it can also just weigh us down. So we have to be really thoughtful about how social media and the other things that are going on in the world, how it affects us, and do your best to be thoughtful and mindful in detaching yourself from what's going on to the best that you can still have that semblance of positivity and radiance and the things that you need, and not let that weigh on you too much.
And some of this too is kind of related to timing as well. So, for me, like, Facebook used to be just this portal for like super cute animal videos and really light kind of silly memes and just stuff that made me laugh, and it was pretty lighthearted. And now it just seems like it's a constant feed of either politics or like which state is doing worse in numbers of cases and numbers of deaths, and it's like never ends, and it's on the news and it's everywhere around you. And what I have found is I really have to set sort of a hard limit for like how long before bed I can watch those things. So I have to switch my mindset and I have to watch something lighter before I go to bed, or I have to just sort of disengage. And my husband and I really like board games. So we may play a game, or we may play like euchre together with an app, just something to completely shift your mind so that you're just not focusing on all this all the time, because there's a delicate balance between keeping up to date with things and knowing what's going on in the world around you, and then just getting like sucked into this negativity that is not productive and it's not helpful. And so everyone's going to struggle in different ways with this, and everyone's going to have their outlets that they tend to go to. And so, there's just a number of ways that you can kind of monitor this, but even something silly like just keeping like a tab, like keep a piece of paper next to your computer or like stuck to your phone case, and make a tab, like a little tally every time that you open a social media app or website, and actually watch how much you're doing it, because you might be shocked at how much you're doing it. And if you watch your screen time every day and average it over a week, I think honestly most of us would be shocked and probably embarrassed at how much we're looking at screens, and it's all just this like negative feed for the most part, with not a whole lot of positive return on that investment of time. So just thinking about like, what are those sort of mental triggers for you that tend to kind of bring you down into the swamp that makes it hard for you to get out of. And so again, that's going to be different for everybody, but finding a way to detach from that. And this does not mean, when I say like, you know, detaching from social media, you don't have to read, you know, like The Grapes of Wrath, and, you know, get something really heavy. Like you just have to figure out a way to like break that chain a little bit so that you can focus your mind on something else. So those are all the formal slides that we had prepared. And so we kind of wanted to open it up again. And there's actually some really good comments I'm seeing in the chat window here. So Justin said they're homeschooling 4 kids. Holy cow. And you guys purchased a keyboard so that you can all learn the piano together. So that's really cool. That might wear on people's nerves a little bit.
I think the piano might be slightly more tolerable than like a trombone or piano is probably a good choice.
That's a good point. I learned viola, and my mom did not find that restful when I first learned. And and they have headphones. Oh, that's smart. It's a keyboard, so they can use headphones. Mary Ray, so Dean Ray had a really good comment here. So keeping an accountability to sometimes check in and vent before having a knee-jerk response. I feel like that may have been partially directed to me, because Dean Ray could probably tell you, and I hope she doesn't, all sorts of stories about text messages that I've sent, just about situations that, you know, like made me mad, or things that I'm just like, what is going on? So it is really good to have those trusted colleagues and trusted friends and classmates that you can have that kind of frank discussion with. And sometimes finding who that person is that you can just either call or text and say, okay, am I being crazy? Like, did I really read into this like too much or not? You know, so I think it's really important to have those kind of connections in your life.
I saw Matt said in here as well, maintenance of positive mindset throughout this process has been key. And again, I think, yes, maintaining a positive mindset is imperative. I know one of the things, my work colleagues, we have a weekly Zoom, just kind of like catching up, how's the week going? And we always start and we set a max. It's like, all right, for the first 5 minutes, anyone who needs to vent about something that's going on, and we vent, and then it's like, all right, let's shift. Let's talk about all the positive, or let's talk about other things that are going on. Because the reality is we have some negative things that we need to be able to talk about with trusted people. But we also can't send ourselves into a death spiral of negativity. So you've got to find a way to shift it and get back to the positive.
Yeah, Matt, I'm curious if you're willing to maybe speak up about what kind of things have worked for you to maintain a positive mindset. Maybe?
Hello?
Oh, there you are.
Hi, Matt.
Oh, there I am. Sorry about that.
There you are.
Yeah, just like we talked about earlier with the social media thing, like just zoning that out as much as you can, and then just focusing on the day-to-day things that make you happy versus the things that would upset you. So for me, that's just been the biggest thing in terms of a mindset, and just things to look forward to daily, weekly, even monthly. That just helps you stay positive that way.
And Dean Voss mentioned, you know, practicing gratitude and lots of cooking. And this is a perfect example of what works for some people does not work for others, because if I was forced to cook every day, that's like the furthest thing from positivity for me. I hate cooking. And so, you know, for Dean Voss, that works great. And I know that some of the students have had those conversations as well with her about some of these cooking different dishes from your home country or just from your family. So I think that's fantastic. And then, Michael said, rewarding yourself for accomplishing the smallest of things.
Yes.
You know, that's a really good approach.
One of the things I will share, and you know, I will admit it's one of the hardest things with this whole crisis has been getting out of bed. And I think it's because there's no thing. Like, I'm going to work, but I'm not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before it was like, well, I know it's going to take me this long to drive and I have to be on the road by this time to get there. So I had to do these certain things to fit within the plan or the schedule. And so for me, I will admit, like, I feel like it's a big accomplishment to get up on time every day. Like, so yes, celebrate the little things. It's a Monday. We're here. We made it. We're here again.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
This is Kelly. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Hello, Kelly.
Oh, hi. So, you know, it's been so interesting because I kind of, I feel like I'm on this emotional roller coaster. And so I love the idea of the positive mindset, but I'll have to admit, there's times where it's very difficult. I'm homeschooling 3 children and I'm working more than I was working before they came home from and are homeschooling now. And so there's just a lot of extra stuff going on. I feel even though our social calendar and our calendar itself is less busy, I feel more busy and I feel more stretched. And I think the thing that's been so interesting though is the emotional roller coaster and dealing with there's moments where I'm like, this quarantine is the best thing that's ever happened to us. And then there's moments, and then literally like the next moment I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose it. My daughter flopped back on the couch the other day and she's like, I'm losing it. And I'm like, yeah, me too, you know? And, but I think, but one thing that's really helped me and my husband, because he's working from home now as well, and he's super busy with his job, is communicating that with one another and saying, you know what, right at this moment, this isn't a good time to, like, I just need you to know where I'm at. Mm-hmm. And so being able to verbalize how we're feeling, and if is it one of those days that quarantine's the best time in the world, or quarantine is like the worst thing that's ever happened to us, because it just helps us communicate with each other better and know kind of how we need to navigate around that. And that's been really super helpful to us, especially in these last like week or two when things are a little testy sometimes when we're having to fight 3 kids together.
Yeah, I think that, well, yes, of course, Dean Latender, you can chime in.
There's still work to do. You can cut me off anytime, Dean Latender.
I wanted to be respectful. First of all, just a couple of quick comments. One, fantastic. What a way to kick this off. You guys are just sensational. And the graphics that you put together, starting right at the beginning with work life, and you just, the two of you, I don't know how much you rehearsed this ahead of time, but you ought to take this show on the road. It's fantastic. And it's a message that should be more broadly distributed. My key takeaway is the Beachbody workout, because I know that Louise is also on the line. And after 45 years of marriage, I'm sure she's sending little notes like, hey, did you pick up on the Beachbody workout thing? I just wanted to share that with you so that everyone knows that the pressure's on now. I got to get going with the Beachbody workout.
That's amazing.
And it's just wonderful to see all of you, albeit virtually.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, to Kelly's point, you know, and I kind of touched on this earlier, that I mean, this really is messy. I mean, everyone is on this bizarre emotional roller coaster, and that is a great way to describe it. I mean, there's just some bizarre ups and downs, and it's really hard to predict when those are going to happen. And, you know, Kelly, like what you're speaking of, my husband and I had a day like this last week. I don't know what it was. Like, nothing about the day seemed especially different or stressful, but we both just were like these mini Hulks in the house. Like, I mean, he couldn't say anything to me that was right without just making me super angry, and vice versa. And we both were like, you know, I don't know what it is, but I've just had it today. I'm tired of being here. I'm tired of being in my office. I'm tired of not knowing if our parents are going to be okay, you know. And then some of the more, like the more difficult, heavy conversations come up from that too. But I totally agree that, like, we just have to acknowledge it and communicate it, and just let people know, like, I'm having a bad day, or maybe you're having a really great day, and you can try to use that energy to bring someone else up if you can. Like, so Shannon Powers made a really good point about checking in with your friends and family, and kind of like keeping some perspective that not one of us is going through this alone. And that, I think that perspective is really hard to feel when you're sitting in your office by yourself all the time. And yes, you can see people on a Zoom meeting, but we talked about this even before everyone jumped on. It's even the way meetings end now is weird because everyone's all of a sudden just gone. Like there's not this process of chit chat and people walking out the door. It's just like everyone's gone off of your screen and there you are by yourself again. And that's a really unsettling feeling. So I think it is really important to, like Anna just mentioned, having a virtual book club to get together. I think anything that you can do to stay in touch with people and just kind of like keep acknowledging that this is hard for everybody and everyone needs support in different ways at different times. And you never know when that's going to come up. And, to the students on the call, and even our faculty colleagues as well, but speaking especially to the students, you guys are in a really, really unique situation because you have worked, whether you're a P1 or you're a P4 or somewhere in between, you have worked so hard to get to where you are. And it's a very natural feeling that you feel like a lot of things have just been robbed from you. A lot of experiences that other people have had that you didn't get to have this year, whatever year that is that you're in. And, please don't hesitate to reach out to a faculty member that you trust or an upperclassman or friends, because we recognize that you guys are under a very different type of stress than some of us who are kind of just working our day in, day out and kind of having the struggles of work life, but not struggling with like literally building a career and something that you've worked so hard for up to that point. So, please don't hesitate to reach out. Just if you want to talk and get more ideas about ways to kind of continue to be resilient, or if you really are struggling and need some help, we have a number of resources that we can point you to. So I don't want to end on a really like heavy note. I just want to put that out there that we recognize everyone's going through different levels of stress here. So,
and one thing in celebrating Zada, I would love it if Melissa, I know you put in the comment box, I'd love to hear your perspective and what would Zada do in this difficult time?
Well, it's interesting, just a couple of days ago would have been our 5th Zada Cooper Leadership Symposium. And of course, it was the right choice for us to not physically be together. And we look forward to the building dedication and all of us being together. But what I just wanted to reflect on, I think Zada was incredibly resilient and she had grit and she pivoted. And so, I think what we did today, and it makes me want to tear up that we have people on the call and we're connecting and we have community and we're sharing in a very vulnerable way about what's worked for us, but what hasn't worked or how it's been hard. And I think that was very Zada-like. I also reflected to Barb Kelly that, Zada lived through the last big pandemic, the Spanish flu. And after that, she founded Kappa Epsilon just a year or so after. Rho Chi was founded right around that time too. So, I think there's time for sure. We need to be focused inward and get through this, but that also means that incredible leadership can move forward. So I just wanted to say on behalf of our planning committee that we're so excited to be with the students and the residents and some people from across the state of Iowa, but also we have national leaders on today's call, and we know that we will throughout the week, and that we look forward to working with you. And we know this is different and it's going to be messy and, technology might not work, but we're just thrilled that on year 5, we're standing and we're standing together. And that's what Zada would want us to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Melissa, because that really is a good point to sort of bring around to the very beginning of what we talked about, is that we really didn't want to let the spirit of Zada sort of just fall away this year because we couldn't have the symposium. And, it looks very different, of course, than it would have this year. And, but, in some ways, I think that we've made some really good lemonade here out of the lemons that we were given, because this is the first time that we've had such a diverse audience as far as people at different stages of their career. And everyone's going to have a different sort of little nugget of wisdom to impart to the conversation. So I think that is just like, I'm actually really inspired to see that we've got such a wide variety of people on this call. And I want to acknowledge Brett Barker made a really good point about the work-life integration, constantly bouncing from like one role to another, and saying that they're all different roles, but they're all part of your life. And so it sometimes does work better if you integrate them together rather than trying to have like really strict lines between them. And I fully agree with that. That's sort of my general approach in my normal life, is that, I typically would work at home at night, and I would be a little bit more fluid with my time. I have personally found in the current situation that I have to be a little bit more strict just because I feel like I'm going to go crazy if I don't. Because my home office is like 2 rooms down from my bedroom, and it would just be too easy to like always just be working and never really leave it behind. So I've had to kind of implement a couple of creative measures so I personally don't go crazy, but I can recognize that that may not work, for everybody. And that's the beauty of it, is that everyone is going to have a different approach.
Nicole, if I could just add one more thing, I would say that another aspect of this, where I've heard from a goodly number of folks, faculty, staff, students, are those trying to balance things when you have children at home too. You have 2 working spouses, and then you have children, which adds a whole nother layer of responsibility to it. And I know in our case, and Louise in my case, is grandchildren. And how do you help your children navigate managing grandchildren, because they're trying to go to school, you're trying to provide. So I don't know if anybody, before you finish the day, wants to just maybe touch on that, but I think that adds another measure of complexity that provides a great deal of stress between relationships and who's on first right now and so on and so forth. So maybe just a few minutes of that to those that can offer any thoughts about ways in which they have found a good way to manage that, which I think is incredibly challenging.
Yeah, I agree. And I have nothing to offer to that conversation. I don't have children at home. But yeah, I know we do have students on the call that have children at home, and we've got a number of faculty with kids at home. If anybody feels comfortable speaking up about the challenges of that, or what has or has not worked.
I'll chime in. I'm a big fan of making schedules. It's very regimented around my house.
Susan Voss has something in the chat as well.
Let's see.
She took the
I
call.
can unmute
Wow.
myself.
Okay, go ahead.
I started our Zada call when I was about to go on a bike ride with my 6-year-old, and I actually had forgotten that the call was today. And so I asked her if it was okay. She said, "Oh yeah, Mom, you can do that." So I took the call and had my phone sitting on my bicycle rack while we rode our bikes around the neighborhood. So I was able to listen in to the first half hour while we rode our bikes. So we were integrating work and home at the same time. But it's been really great. I've definitely taken away some messages today. So thank you guys.
I'm glad that you were able to attend even on your bike.
I think for me, it's been really interesting because my girls never really knew what it was that I did. And I mean, certainly they're getting the clear message that I have a lot of meetings, right? I'm on the phone every time, and they walk into the office, they're like, seriously, again, you're on a meeting. But what's interesting to me is how much they're picking up on, areas of responsibility and the things that I really care about and the really cool conversations. And I think that our children learn so much by our example, and to see us so highly engaged in our work, it's also helpful. I think we as parents are really hard on ourselves, and we automatically assume that, we are compromising something as a mother or a father by working. And yet the lessons that they also learn from the examples that you said about quality work, hard work, all of those things that are probably a little more subtle in our messages, they can do just by being in your presence. And that's something that they would not normally ever have an opportunity to get unless it was a take your daughter to work day or or something like that, which we really don't do very often. So it's kind of neat.
Dean Ray I'm going to tell a story about a call that I was on with her. This is actually pretty funny. Speaking of kids at home and how sometimes things just happen and you see people's real lives. So I was on a call with her, and all of a sudden Mary said, hold on. And she muted her mic, and I could see her talking to someone off the screen. She came back in and she was like, so we have a salsa on white carpet situation. And I don't know why it just struck me really funny. But that's just like, it doesn't get any more real life with kids at home than that, when you're like, well, you know what, that's going to have to wait until I'm done with this phone call.
Well, what was more real than that, Nikki, is that James came walking into the office, and she's like, is Jenna sick? she puked on the carpet in the dining room, and I said, it's salsa. so that made it even more humorous.
So yeah, sometimes you just have to, find some humor in some of these situations, because it is very real life. Everyone's dealing with different things at home. So
well, the coolest thing that I can share is that our younger daughter, who's 11, she had a bad bike riding kind of experience at around 6 years old when she was trying to learn how to ride a bike. She fell off the bike and was very nervous about ever trying again. And, as a mom, I was stressed about it, because it's like riding a bike is one of the most basic things that your kid learns how to do. So for the past several years, I've been trying to encourage her, and she absolutely would not do it. And I was getting more and more stressed. And all of a sudden I was on one of our Zoom calls, and sure enough, our older daughter, who's going to be 14 soon, is out there in the driveway, and Harper just takes off, and she's riding her bike down the sidewalk. I mean, I had to get my phone out while I'm on calls with everyone, videoing my daughter going down, the sidewalk, riding her bike. And I thought, okay, if nothing else good comes out of this experience, I got to see my daughter ride her bike, which was just, and to have my other daughter teach her was just icing. So really,
and Mary,
really
you'll
cool.
remember that forever, and so will
forever,
she.
Forever.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's great.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Well, unless everybody has any final comments, maybe I can just tell you about tomorrow's meeting. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Tomorrow at 5 o'clock, same time, the topic will be Blind Leading the Blind, Strength in Numbers, and it'll be hosted by Kelly Brock, and who is the chair of the College of Pharmacy Genesis Board, and other members of the Genesis Board as well. So I thank you so much, Nikki and Bree, and what a fantastic talk. What a fantastic, all these tips and everybody chiming in. We appreciate everybody.
Barb, Barb, just one, if I don't mean to interrupt you, but
no problem.
I just want to piggyback on top of that. Virtually everyone on this call, I've had the opportunity to chat with over the course of the last 7 weeks, and whether it's town hall meetings with faculty and staff, or fellowship Fridays with students, and other colleagues who are on this line where we've exchanged emails, or some have been so kind to send in cards and things of that nature. I just want to emphasize something that I believe merits a point that perhaps some of you don't have the same perspective as me, and that is that I'm part of 2 larger consortia with deans, and I can just tell you straight up that the overwhelming majority of colleges of pharmacy are not handling it the way we're doing it. And they feel a lot more disconnected than we feel. And that's a tribute to each and every one of you on this call, and to many others who have helped us navigate these last 7 weeks. To say this is not pleasant is a gross understatement. But the way that we've gone about this as a team, the way we've gone about this in a manner that is both professional, but also very humanistic and very caring and very loving. Just kudos to everybody, and my heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you. And I just simply want to close. Nicole and Bree, as I said before, you guys ought to take this show on the road. I don't know how long you prepared, but this was just, what a wonderful way to kick off this series. And those of you that had the idea of putting this series together, kudos to you as well. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you very, very much for all that you do to make our college so special. Each and every one of you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dean Latender. And I think on that note, thank you everyone for joining, faculty, staff, students, everyone that's on this call. We really didn't know going into this if there was going to be like 3 of us talking to each other. So, I'm just really glad that we had really a good turnout today, and we had a really good audience of people. So thank you for taking the time on a Monday evening to hang out with us for a little bit. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And likewise, I swear, I just want to also thank everyone for being here. I will admit, as an extrovert, I'm going to try not to tear up. It has been so nice just seeing everyone. I've missed you all, and I will continue to miss you until we meet again. So thank you for making time for us.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, I think on that note, we can sign off. So everybody have a good evening. Thank you.
Go Hawks.
Bye, guys. Good night.
Good night, everybody.